All right, Pat, you got to tell me what the fuck happened in Mulholland Drive. What happened in that movie?
I have to ask you, because everyone who watches it the first time is just like, I mean, if you could watch it 20 times and be like, well, I don't know what's going on. What did you think of Mulholland Drive?
I loved it. Yeah, thought it was fantastic. Thought it was 10 out of 10. I came into it very primed to love David Lynch movies, primed to love stories about Los Angeles in particular. That's really what I thought. I've read a ton of books set in Los Angeles. Philip Marlowe, his detective novels, they're all mostly set in Los Angeles. John Fonte, Ask the Dust, set in Los Angeles. So I was that was kind of like through the first, 75% of the movie. It's like, there's a lot of driving around LA. There's a lot of, I mean, there literally are street names and stuff. So I loved it. I thought it was great.
I'm going to spoil Mulholland Drive for people. It's a movie that's
Yes.
25 years old, so you probably should have seen it
Huge
by now.
spoilers. Yes.
And well, it's a pretty difficult movie to spoil because when we spoke last time, I said you should watch this movie. Like, how do you get into David Lynch? And I thought this is probably the Twin Peaks is the easiest way to do it, but obviously that's a big commitment. It's an entire
Right.
TV show. You don't probably have the 40 hours required to watch that. Then the newer season that happens 25 years later. This is a crisp, like 2 hours and 15 minutes of just craziness.
Yes. Although, I mean, after watching that, after watching Mulholland Drive, I'm like, oh, I think I'd really enjoy Twin Peaks. Now, I remembered watching Mulholland Drive. I read this essay by David Foster Wallace. I mean, I must have read this 12 years ago, probably when I was either when I was in high school or young in college, all about David Lynch and about that movie or that article. I believe was more about two movies I've never seen, Lost Highway and Blue Velvet, but just sort of how David Lynch sort of approaches making movies like a writer would approach writing literary fiction. But of course, in a very American way, we don't really do literary fiction in America anymore. We make movies, we make TV, and that again totally came off to me watching the movie as well.
Well, Mulholland Drive was shot as a TV
As a
series.
TV show.
And then they realized that they weren't going to be picked up from, I think, by Canal Plus, which is the French studio that was going to make it. And then they ended up weaving it into a movie, hence some of the darker elements that happened, but also why you see like Robert Forster as one of the detectives at the beginning. It's like, okay, I know that face. I know that Robert Forster was in Jackie Brown, which had come out just before this. Like he's on the up and up. He got an Oscar nomination for that. Like, why is he in this movie for 38 seconds? Because it was going to be a TV series and he was going to be in the TV series, and that just never happened. So I thought that was pretty interesting to go through. Let's start with this. You tell me what you think happened.
Well, I did obviously ruin this a bit for myself.
You went and looked, didn't you?
Yeah, of course. So this was my thought watching it. My first thought watching it was this is basically a murder mystery. There's going to be a detective. There's the shadowy cabal, obviously, that is pushing Camilla Rhodes. I have to admit the plot. I don't know if there's a plot twist of effectively you realize the characters are waking up. We go from a dream state, from something that is non-reality inside of the movie to quote unquote reality, although the reality scenes are not that realistic. That I did not predict that, right? I was not like, oh, this is totally where this movie is going. Like I basically thought like, okay, we'll get, we'll learn Rita's real name, we'll learn why she got ran off the road, and it'll get tied up. Like when you watch what's the name of the old English lady? She writes Hercule Poirot. Why am I forgetting? Agatha Christie. Like it's an Agatha Christie where it's all mysterious and you don't understand, and then at the end it all wraps up. So that is definitely not what happened. That is it does not get all wrapped up in a neat little bow at all.
Does it matter, do you think, to enjoy this movie whether or not you know what's going on? Because I don't think that it does.
No, because it's a movie about how it makes you feel, and
it's a vibe. It's a pure vibes movie.
It's pure vibes movie. Very similar, again, to like reading one of these. Like the quote that came back to me was someone asked Raymond Chandler about his first book that's probably the most popular murder mystery ever, The Big Sleep. And there's this red herring in that book where a chauffeur of a rich guy who's tied to a mystery dies. He's dead in a car that drives off a pier. It's never explained. The rest of the novel, we never come back to it. And someone asked him, in an interview, like, "Oh, what happened to the chauffeur?" And he's like, "Oh, I just forgot about it. Just forgot to resolve that mystery because it's not the point, right? It's about the vibes, and the vibes are they're all over the place in this movie.
So when I first saw this movie would have been probably 2001 on DVD. So I bought this DVD. Everyone talked about how great, this art house movie, David Lynch is back. I was like, I don't even know who David Lynch is, so I'm going to jump into this. So I bought the DVD back when DVDs were like $15 or something like that. Mulholland Drive was not flying off the shelf for DVD sales, but inside of the DVD there was a booklet that was penned by David Lynch, and it's 10 hints to what is happening in this movie, which is kind of just like follow the blue key. Like always be aware
Yes.
of like where the blue key is. It's like, okay. Like, so you're watching this, especially when I was 16, trying to figure this out. Like, I don't know what is going on, but I've seen it so many times now that I've wrapped my head around. I have a pretty good sense of what is happening and like what it means, what is going on in the movie. I don't think that David Lynch is dead now, hence why we're talking about this.
Yep.
But he never came out and said what it was about, but you can infer based on what you see on the screen, watching it so many times, like, okay, I see how that connects to this connects to this, and like what is actually going on in the first 80% of the movie and why that plays out so differently in the last 20% of the movie, but explains a lot of what's going on and why she is basically dreaming. I mean, the first 80% of the movie is a dream. And it's about what she would have hoped for in her reality, which when you see her reality, it is nothing like it is. But there are the elements there. There's the love story there. Like she wants to help out the damsel in distress. But I wanted to ask you, there's one scene in this movie that I think is like the famous scene, at least amongst people that I know that have actually seen this movie, which is very few, by the way. It's the scene in the diner with that guy who's in basically everything and always plays a really creepy dude.
Yes.
And they have to go out back and he's talking about his dream. How terrified were you of that scene at the very end?
Not that terrified because
Really?
I mean, I terrified. It's just maybe not how I experience movies. My reaction to the scene at the end is actually that is maybe to me I thought like kind of like the less deft part of the movie where the symbolism gets a little bit overwrought cuz my read on that is the monster, the horrible thing is like
It's her guilt.
homelessness. But it translates to everyone, right? It's just the black demon, the black whatever that just kind of lurks for everyone and is very ever present in Los Angeles. If you read and watch a lot of stuff about Los Angeles, it's the land of broken dreams.
See, I took it the other way because everything that happens in the dream is about Naomi Watts. So I feel
Mhm.
like that part of it, because she pays off the hitman to kill her lover in real life at that same
Right.
diner. So that diner knows what she's done and she is feeling so guilty. That is the black cloud, the guilt that she cannot give up.
I hadn't thought of that interpretation. I mean, I guess because I mean, we've seen that guy from the first Winky's Diner scene and everything, right? He
He's,
actually
he's Bobby Barrett in Mad Men. He's awesome.
he you know what he reminds me of? He reminded me a lot of the way Quentin Tarantino plays himself in Pulp Fiction. Don't fucking Jimmy me. Actually,
You know who he is too? He's also Dean Pritchard, Jeremy Piven's like lackey in Old School.
of course, I mean that he's made a good living being a character actor. I wanted to ask you about this. I mean the primary association my brain made with this, and maybe it was just because Robert Forster is in effectively the opening scene. I experienced the whole movie very Tarantino like, right? Just
Ooh.
very that's and maybe it really is just me, but it reminded me of kind of art house Reservoir Dogs. And maybe you didn't experience that at all, but that was just like kind of the vibe I got.
No, and maybe it's because I've become so accustomed to David Lynch's work over the years that Tarantino, while operating like under an art house
He
banner,
makes
while
big
making
movies.
what's that?
He makes big movies.
He does now, but he like if, let's just talk about Reservoir Dogs and we can talk about Pulp Fiction in that way, like smaller budget movies, although there were big stars in Pulp Fiction. Like they would have gone underneath the independent cinema art house banner from the early 90s. But Tarantino is an artist in a way that he repurposes other works of art
Right.
in order to like, it's basically just giant homages. There's like 70 homages in every movie. He just crafts a story around that and uses things that he saw from blaxploitation movies, Japanese cinema, whatever it might be. David Lynch is just on an island by himself. He probably dreamed up this thing and he's like, now I'm going to put it onto a camera. Like it doesn't necessarily make any sense a lot of the times or need to make sense, but that's why the vibes are just, I find, so much different with David Lynch.
That is certainly true. Although there is some, I liked what he did with the references, and like obviously I like had to go up and read all this stuff. You know, I'm not, I don't know a ton about 16th century Italian art and things like that.
But
And
I see. I think that what happens, you can't dig into David Lynch's stuff too much from that sense. It has
right,
nothing to do with an opera or anything like that. Like it's just he thought that this sounded cool and it would be creepy, so that's why it's there.
yeah. What
Like
do
there's
you?
no more. There's like with Tarantino, be like, oh, because that happened here in this movie here, that actually means this within the course of the movie, and you can draw these parallels between that and infer something that way. With Lynch's stuff, he's like, no, this is like a vibe, man. Like, listen to this creepy ass song.
Do you think it what is a bit too obvious at the beginning of the movie when they close up on the pillow? Do you think that is a bit too like, okay, we're entering a dream?
In retrospect, yes, but I think when you're
Right.
watching it the first time, that's not the first thing that pops into your mind because there's just so much weird stuff happening. I also enjoy that in the dream, everyone, because you would watch it and think, man, this is like bad acting. This is like
Yes.
campy. But
Yes.
then Naomi Watts has that scene where she actually goes to the audition and acts, and you're like, oh, okay, what's going on here?
No, that actually I thought was the most artistic. Like I thought that was the achievement of the movie. That when you think back on from the beginning, all the pauses, you know, the extra beats that are taken in between the conversation, all the weird stilted ways that the characters speak, you think as you're watching, you're like, this is a bad movie. Like this is a B movie. Like why is everyone so bad? And then you actually realize, no, this is because it's either. I actually read an interpretation. Maybe you like this, maybe you won't, that actually the first, you know, before Diane wakes up, that it's actually a movie, that it's actually like a shitty B movie
that
about.
she would be going to audition in because that's what she talks about in her reality. I mean, that I think that's a pretty
Yeah.
good interpretation. I would say that it's a dream, but the dream is her being in this murder mystery movie with the girl that she loves.
Yeah, I think. I mean, obviously, I think the cool thing about it is there are no answers.
No,
You know, there. Yeah, which is pretty cool, right?
but it's a fun movie to talk about, if nothing else, because like how creepy is that cowboy guy?
The cowboy, that was that you want there that was the vibe area that got me the most. That was the area of the movie where I was most like, something is deeply unsettling, and I can't figure out what exactly is so deeply unsettling, but it's
Well,
sits poorly.
that's the right word, I think, is that the whole movie is weirdly unsettling. And I mean, that's sort of the narrative of all David Lynch movies, that if he's except for The Straight Story, which is like a really by the books, like friendly, nice movie, which is really strange. But it has this like sheer in Twin Peaks, this is Twin Peaks. It has this veneer of small town America. Obviously, this one's in LA, but just like normal society. These are normal people, and then you just look like 1 inch underneath, and it's very unsettling what's actually going on here.
And it actually makes more sense to me now after watching this why his version of Dune is so non well regarded, why everyone hated it, why the studio executives cutting a bunch of time out of it. Why? And because Dune is a deeply unsettling book. If you actually read Dune, deeply unsettling, deeply weird book. And I think particularly after the success of the Villeneuve films, like that is the most David Lynch gets talked about on the internet is the 1984 Dune. And it totally makes sense to me why for a mass-produced movie, no one would have liked that. No one would have wanted David Lynch's actual vision of Dune.
It's funny because they would now.
Yes, probably. Yeah, I think so. Better special effects. He could have gotten the best actors. Although, watching Timothée Chalamet and David Lynch have a conversation, that would be a treat. It really, I would listen to a podcast between those two guys.
David Lynch, strangely, is like the most all-American guy you could ever like print out. If you could 3D print all-American dude, it would weirdly be David Lynch, although none of his work really speaks to that.
Well, American art is so funny because a lot of the time it is just calling back to big things in Western society, which means it's European, which means it's French, which means it's Italian, which means it's English. So to make American art, you really shouldn't have very many forebears. You should be making things that are unsettling because America's a weird place. It's the richest country on earth, but we have this huge wealth disparity. We have these big metropolises where people from small, basically villages move and then become a part of the peasant class because there are not enough high-paying jobs for them. America's a deeply unsettling country. We're actually recording this before the Four Nations final. So you and I are technically at war.
Well, I mean, it doesn't mean just hockey. Are we technically at war? That was a question I was going to ask you. I mean, you guys don't feel that way. Canada feels like we're kind of at war with the United States. That's why the booing is happening at these things.
Yeah, because our president is just going to buy you guys. That's what I heard.
No, I mean, that's not what we heard. We heard straight from him that he's just basically going to take over our country. You know what Canadians don't like? That. Hearing that.
So I wanted to ask you about this because Canada still has some relationship with the United Kingdom, right? Like the Queen's still on your money, isn't she?
Well, the King is technically on our money now.
The King's on your money now.
Money isn't being printed physically like it used to be, so there's just not a lot of new bills in circulation. But technically, the King would be on the money now. But for 70 years, Queen Elizabeth II was on it. Yeah.
Is Canada a protectorate? I unclear to me. I never learned my Canadian independence history. Like I don't know what the relationship is there. But would Keir Starmer, like, does he give a shit or is he just like whatever?
No, like it has nothing to do with that. I mean, just being a part of NATO, technically that would trigger. It's funny, like when the U.S. declared like war basically on Afghanistan after 9/11, only one country from NATO went with the United States because if the United States go, this country goes too. Do you know what country that was?
Tony Blair, right? Great Britain.
No, it was Canada. They were the first ones there.
I actually did not know that. That is a piece of history. I just know from listening to a lot of British-based podcasts that they all hate Tony Blair for him basically just being George Bush's drinking buddy. That they were like, this motherfucker's got no spine. All he wants to do is follow George Bush.
Yeah. I mean, then that was sort of what was going on at the time. So Canada feels like they're under attack, which is a really weird place to be at because the booing, I don't know, like how is the booing of the anthem being covered in America? Because honestly, I mean, it happened in Quebec for one thing. Here's how bad it's gotten. On Canada Day, Quebecers do not raise the Canada flag at all. And you saw them in the crowd booing the national anthem of the U.S., and like swinging Canadian flags around everywhere. Like somehow this has united Quebec and the rest of Canada.
Well, because in tribalism, you always go to what is closest to you. And so even if the enemy of the Quebecois or the enemy of the Americans is the friend of the Quebecois people, right?
Well, it would affect, I mean, these sort of threats and like annexation talk. It's like, is Canada going to be the new Ukraine? Like this doesn't sound great. And it's weird too, because like you see it talked about and you see all the people that have lost their minds about Trump in 2015. And then again, this time around, like, oh my God, Project 2025 is going to like be the end of America and it's going to be fascism and all this stuff. And, people like genuinely got freaked out and panicked. And like, me and you were sitting here like, come on guys, like this is not going to happen. And now we're in that spot where, yeah, it's probably not going to happen. You're like, what if it does happen? Like we got to like put that on the back burner. Like, they're talking about it, if nothing else. Like, that can't be a good thing. And the French have the most to lose with all of this because their culture goes away. Like, they are protected underneath the Canadian Constitution to have their French culture. If somehow Canada and the US became, conjoined, what happens to Quebec?
I don't get in reality how this works, because it's not like the Canadian government is just going to be like, all right, we acquiesce to being a state with no violence, right? I mean,
No,
that
there
seems,
would be violence. That's the whole thing. That's the kind of like, ugh.
well, then what is the game? I guess, I mean, from United States perspective, wars are good for the economy. You need to stimulate the economy. We have this horrible inflation. We need to justify all this government spending. Wars are generally good for that, but it doesn't feel like, if they have the Israeli war that they can fund. We just the United States just sold a bunch more weapons to Israel. It just makes
It
no
has
sense to
nothing to
me.
do with going to war when it comes to Canada. It's about just access to our resources because we have so many more natural resources than you guys have. We have all the oil, we have all of the
Right.
water, we have all of the potash, which makes everything in the manufacturing sector in the United States. And like, that's why the tariffs were a big thing. And if they're like, oh, well, the tariffs aren't working, why don't we just go take them? Like, that's the fear.
I mean, wouldn't I guess the United States would definitely win that war,
Yeah. Although,
but
do you know why there is a Geneva Convention?
well, doesn't the Geneva Convention basically doesn't apply because it's
It
been
doesn't, but do you
broken?
know why it exists?
I don't know.
Canadians in World War II.
Interesting. I did
How
not know that.
brutal they were. They didn't take Nazi prisoners of war.
So you learn something new every day. I mean, what is the population discrepancy? I assume the Americans who are in an armed service of some degree has to outnumber the total population of Canada,
There's
or
44
close,
million people in Canada, and 9 of 10 live within 100 miles of the American
of
border.
the border. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of it's weird because the Canadian army is actually quite good, but it's quite small. And most of our army is based off a reaction to the American army because the Americans cover so much that, like, we have a big navy, for example. And like, we're very good at Arctic type, camouflage, desert combat, not really the Canadian strong suit, but like cold weather combat. I just don't see how it could get to an escalation of violence. I don't think the American people would want that. Obviously, the Canadian people wouldn't want that. Like, wouldn't that be? Think about how badly Vietnam went once they put that on TV, and the American populace turned on that war because they were able to watch it at home. Wouldn't it be really weird to see American troops in Toronto just blowing people away on TV?
So the issue that you don't understand from not being here is at least 30%. I won't say a full 50%, but at least 30% of the people here would just be like, oh, Don says this is a good idea, so it's a good idea. And it just
Nah,
doesn't matter.
I actually don't believe that. I think I get what you're saying, that there are people that just they're all in on Trump, but I think having a visceral experience, a visual experience on something that's actually going on, be like, I don't know if I like this.
I mean, it would also depend on how quick it is, right? So if it's just over in a week, if it's like a bunch of bombs, do it. It's just people dying in Wisconsin and in Toronto. What does someone in Georgia care if a bunch of people in Wisconsin die?
I mean, it's my hope that they would care, that we've been the biggest allies in the world for 50 years more.
I mean, you're barking up the wrong tree. I'm about as anti-war this is basically, of all the things that the conservative wing of American politics has suggested in the last 20 years, this is by far the dumbest and the most short-sighted and the worst idea. But I think it would be successful in getting them what they want, basically.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's essentially what the free trade agreement was about anyway. Like, that kind of solved all problems. Like, even our fresh water supply, which is pretty bountiful, it's hard to get it to the US. It's not like there's a tap that we turn on and it goes to the US. It doesn't actually work like that. I know that they wanted to create a pipeline from the Hudson Bay, I think like down through the Great Lakes. But, I mean, these are projects that scale over time. And I don't even think we'd be opposed to doing that. Like, why not? If we have an abundance of it, why not use it and help everyone out, or sell it? It's just more riches for Canada at that point. But I mean, this is all worst case, hypothetical scenario. But like when this starts to run through your mind, it's like, this wasn't even on my radar a month ago. Now it's like, what are we talking about?
Yeah,
But
I mean, this is
but back to the anthem. That's why the boos are coming for the anthem. Like there is no sort of political protest that the Canadians can actually do. People aren't booing Americans because we hate American people. It's just we're kind of terrified about this. And this is the only recourse we have is booing an anthem at a hockey game. And I don't even know if that would happen outside of Montreal, to be perfectly honest with you, because other times within the past like 5 years, if the PA system at a hockey game went out or the microphone didn't work for the American anthem, the Canadian crowd would sing the national anthem for the US to make sure that it got sung. Like that's
that would not happen here.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't know the words, but like there was like you know what I'm saying? Like it's really strange.
So I will say I have noticed this Four Nations thing. First off, the funniest thing is that the NHL has gone out of its way to be non-political forever, for as long as possible. And now they launched themselves into basically the most politically contentious game played on North American soil. 20 years, 30. I mean, I can't think of a comparable thing in
this
my
is
life.
it probably since Miracle on Ice.
Miracle on Ice. Yeah, probably. And that is very funny. But I have noticed in my life a lot more people being like, USA, Canada hockey, man. You got to tune in. You can't possibly miss the Four Nations final. 4.4 million people, according to Nielsen, watched I guess, what was that? The group stage game between Canada and the United States. That has got to be the highest rated hockey game in the United States. I mean,
since 2010 Salt Lake, US versus Canada. Gold medal.
There you go. Oh my God. And I remember that game. What a fucking game that was.
Golden goal, Sidney Crosby.
I was going to say, I don't remember who scored, but America scored with like 13 seconds left in the third period to force the overtime. I don't even remember. I want to say maybe it was an Avalanche player, thinking back on it.
It was, so it delivered that game delivered a 49.8 rating in Canada. I believe it is the most viewed thing in Canadian history on TV. That means half the households in Canada were doing that. The Canadian rating was 5 times what it was in the United States, which was a 9.5, which I think is the highest. Let's see, 15.2 million. It was 28 million people in the US watched it.
I was there. I mean, a phenomenal. And I'm gonna watch tonight. I watch more hockey than the average American, to say that maybe I put it on twice a month or something like that. But
this show's not coming out until next week, right?
Correct. So we should not talk. We don't have to talk about the actual game or anything.
The result, but it's funny that hockey. Because I spoke about this with Rob and Cam on my show. Is hockey the best sport for international competition?
It is, because you can come into it with no allegiances to the players. Like, for example, Canada versus USA men's basketball. You tune in and you're like, oh, dude. Like for me, 2 of the starters of my favorite basketball team play for the Canadians men's team. So it's not like I'm going to be like, I hope Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and Lou Dort suck and they lose and they hurt their ankles. And for soccer, the U.S. men are just so pathetic that it's hard to really beat your chest and be like, yeah, we're really going to dominate Argentina, because they're not going to dominate Argentina. So I think it is. I completely agree. I think it is the perfect international sport.
Yeah, because it's a low barrier of entry. You just root for your sweater. You go on through that way. And it's not like you're watching it. Like, people just don't watch a ton of hockey. Obviously, the hockey heads do. But overall, like, it's a very, like, hockey's fun to watch.
Hockey's fun to watch.
Like, if people gambled more on hockey, I think hockey's ratings would go through the roof, because it's actually quite a fun game to watch when it's the best of the best. Like, I took my kids to a junior game. Well, Canada played Finland to get into, on Monday. It was a holiday here. It was your President's Day, Heritage Day here. So there was a matinee major junior game, the Halifax Mooseheads. So I brought the kids to their first sporting event, and like, they had a great time at it. But like, the action is so slow after watching this, like the highest level of the Four Nations Cup. But it's funny because, like, obviously soccer is the best for this, but in North America, we just don't understand that, because our soccer teams, like, this is the best Canada's ever been at soccer. They scored like 1 goal, they win the World Cup or something like that.
Hey, they were feisty though. Canada went for it. The Americans could actually learn something from that. But yeah, I mean, basically, if America
think about like FIBA and the Olympics for basketball. Basketball is closing the gap.
Yeah.
Between the US being dominant and some of the other nations, but so much of that is like one player dependent. Like how good would
Literally.
Serbia be if they didn't have Jokic?
No, literally. France and Serbia like advanced basically on the strength of one dude on each team.
So you can always impact basketball that way. Whereas hockey, like you need at least like you need a good goalie or like 8 guys that like working together as a team in order to make this happen. And that allows like just the balance in hockey is so much closer too. Like Canada, yes, is the best country at hockey, but the US, Sweden, and Finland and Russia are like 1B, or like any of those 6 teams can win.
And Canada has a shitty goalkeeper situation. So that
we just say goalie.
Not goalkeeper. Yeah, that's my soccer brain. But what it's Bennington, and I don't even know who Bennington's backups are, but they're all terrible because you guys had a whole country of people trying to grow up and be Sidney Crosby, and you forgot to have some beefy boys playing goalie. That is a huge equalizer for the playing field to just basically not have, because I mean everyone knows in international tournaments or round robin hockey tournaments, I mean this works for the Stanley Cup playoffs, if a goalie just loses his mind, if he just loses his mind for 12 games, that's a huge equalizer. So if you just have shitty goalies, I mean then it kind of anything can happen.
Yeah, and the US has like 3 of the best goalies.
Yeah, Hellebuyck, who looked crazy old to me. I was like, I remember you from when I was in college, so you have to be like 36 or something.
The pipe. Well, it used to be a pipeline of French Canadian goalies that just dominated. You went from like Patrick Roy to Martin Brodeur, and that was like 25 years of great Canadian goalies.
Yeah. I agree with this take. I agree. I mean, soccer obviously is, but for soccer, for North Americans, Canada, like if Canada could get to be the 10th best team in the world and the United States could be the 4th best team in the world, then it would transition. But that will literally probably never happen, I would imagine, ever.
And well, we are all sharing, along with Mexico, the World Cup in what, 2028? Is that when it is?
No, one year, brother.
Is it 1 year from now?
Next summer, man. I have
I feel like we just watched. No, it can't be next summer. The Euros are next summer.
When? Oh, you're right. It is 2028.
Yeah, because the World Cup happened. The World Cup happened last year.
No. Nope. I'm right. I knew it. The Euros just happened. What? The Euros just happened. 2026.
Who won the Euros?
Wow.
Because the World Cup got fucked up because of Qatar, didn't it? Because of COVID.
It was in winter. The Euros got fucked up because of COVID. They called it Euro 2020, even though it happened in 2021. I should remember who won the Euros. All I know is that England did not win.
Yeah, England lost in the final, didn't they?
Yeah, to
Italy, Germany, Spain, one of those countries.
Oh, Spain. Yeah, Spain. Lamine Yamal and Nico Williams. Yeah, there we go. I knew I'd get there. But yes.
2026. Yeah, you're right.
And so it'll be very interesting, obviously, because soccer is certainly, I know we've actually talked about this a lot before about how they always say this is going to be it for soccer, and then it never actually is it. I feel, at least in my like actual real life, like just my friends, there are more people who care about soccer than there were 10 years ago.
Are there? Or are you just hanging? Like, is that why you're friends with these people? Because they like soccer like you do?
No, you know what this is literally what I think it is. It's Messi playing in the MLS. I have like my group of friends that I've known since high school and college. They do not care. They've never watched it. They don't know any of these teams in Europe or whatever. Like, it just does not register for them. But they all are at least aware of Major League Soccer. And Messi actually played in Kansas City last night, and a couple guys went to a soccer game.
Yeah, but that's no different. Like, I went to go see Beckham when he played for the Galaxy when they played TFC when I lived in Toronto. That was the one MLS soccer game I ever went to, because it was an event. But once that goes away, what happens then? Like, when Messi doesn't play for Miami anymore, does anyone care?
Maybe by the time he's gone, maybe Ronaldo leaves Saudi Arabia and comes and plays at age 42 or something. I don't know. Messi's kid is on the B team. I don't know. No, I mean, I'm sure you're right. Unless
soccer would have happened in America already if it was gonna happen. It's been 60 years of people saying this.
All right, hear me out. Hear me out. The United States of America makes the World Cup semifinal at home, and
Doesn't
Christian
matter.
Pulisic.
Here's why
Yeah,
it's different. Because the World Cup, and people will be engaged with the World Cup because it's
for
happening
sure.
in America and just like it's happening in Canada. And Canada was pretty into the World Cup last time because Canada hadn't been in the World Cup since 1980. Like it was a big achievement just to get there for them. And then they scored, it was the first goal they ever scored in the World Cup. And people like Alphonso Davies because he's like one of the best players in the world, apparently. I don't know. This is what
No,
people
he
say.
is. He's
So
very
there you
good.
go. So like having a great player really does help as to make someone the face of your team. Like one of the reasons why you're in the World Cup is because this one guy is so good, and that only gets you so far against the best nations. The issue with soccer in America is the World Cup will always be popular. Whether or not America is in the World Cup or not, I think is kind of irrelevant. Obviously, it's better if America would be in it for Americans to get behind it, but it's the best on the best. And that's where soccer fails so miserably in the United States, is they have the 9th best league in the world. Like no one wants to see that.
Yeah, no one cares. No, it's your until Saudi Arabian money comes for America. That actually, by the way,
Live America soccer.
no, I've been workshopping this take for a while. This is the perfect spot to get to it. The Saudi Arabian sheikhs and everything, instead of paying superstars of the world quadrillions to play soccer in their country, they should buy all the MLS teams and have Cristiano Ronaldo, have Neymar, have all these guys come and play in the MLS. Because with that amount of money in America, because rich and famous people like to live in America, it certainly would have a greater chance of being a high level league than sticking it in Saudi Arabia.
I agree, but all the names that you just put off aren't the best players in the world anymore. They're just the most known players in the world.
Sure.
And in order for the league to actually be successful, you need to have the best players of the highest competition that people, when they're 19, want to come to the MLS to play, not to go to Serie A or the Premiership or stick in Germany, wherever it might be. And that's where the MLS fails because they literally get 0 of those players.
Yes. Yeah, you are correct. I don't know. I wonder. I would love the answer to this question if there ever is, because again, so much money here. I wonder if ever America gets to close to an equal footing
I
with
doubt
Europe
it.
and
It's
soccer.
not
You're
ingrained in
probably
the
right.
culture here.
Yeah, too
Kids don't
woke.
grow up, like not enough kids grow up, and there is enough people to maybe facilitate this, but not enough kids grow up wanting to be the best soccer player on earth. They want to be the best basketball player. They want to be an Instagram influencer. Just soccer's not a high up on the priority for a vast segment of the population. That's where it trickles from. Like it's not like England has a huge population comparatively to the US.
No, but they really
It's
only
just like
play like
Finland in hockey. Finland has like 5 million people. Their kids
yeah.
want to be the best hockey players. So hockey's big.
And they really only play 3 sports in England. I mean, I'm sure you find it, but they play soccer, they play rugby, they play cricket, and I guess golf. But that's really about it.
All the Commonwealth sports.
All the Well, wonder how. Answer me that. How did those sports spread? It's hard to say. Really would be impossible.
India's pretty good at cricket.
India's very good at cricket. Yeah, which is always funny when you see that. You're like, huh, wonder how India got good at Britain's sport. Surely there's nothing sorted in the past there. Let's not look into that any further.
Canada is the only Commonwealth country, I think, that sucks at cricket and rugby and all those sports.
That is funny. Why would they be bad at those? I guess.
I would guess it's obviously North American influence. Also, I think climate would probably have a lot to do with it.
Yeah. India's terrible at soccer. Like truly.
Which is shocking. Why is China so bad at soccer?
I have no answer to these because these are some of the most populous regions on earth. There's been like a real grassroots effort to, add money into these things. I mean, they just might not be sports that are super. They just might not be countries that are super conducive to leisure time activity. I don't know. I don't really have an answer. But I bet if the country of India or the Indian Football Association hired 10 people away from the English FA and said, in 20 years, we want a World Cup semifinal, they could be like, all right, well, we're going to do this in this village. We're going to do the, or India is set up into states, just like the United States. And we're going to set up all these little facilities and we're going to streamline they could probably do it.
Yeah, it's
I
really
would guess.
confusing. Just having over 1 billion people in each country, why China and India are not better at sports. China's good at the sports that they're good at,
Right.
but that's basically about it. Like mass international type sports, like bad at basketball. Their women's hockey team is actually a lot better now than they used to be because they seemingly pump money into that. But being worse than South Korea at a lot of these sports is just really strange. But it's probably to do as well that, you know, Japan and South Korea have so much of an American influence and embrace American culture that kids probably got excited for some of these sports 30 years ago. And they're like, hey, I like baseball. I like basketball. Let's try out these sports. So they're just inherently bigger in these places. I think that's one of the reasons why, you know, it's not that baseball is going down the tubes. It's just fewer kids play baseball now. Like you used to be able to, I mean, yeah, I don't have the firsthand experience of this, but just even like wiffle ball games in New York and that kind of thing, like what kids would do in the 70s. They don't do that now.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Baseball has fallen off a cliff in popularity here in the United States. And honestly, I assume elsewhere. I assume it's less popular in South American countries.
Oh, see, I would say the opposite of that. I bet you it's still pretty big in both Central America. I mean, South America is not great at baseball anyway. Like Venezuela's pretty good. Like you don't see a lot of Colombian players. You don't see a lot of Brazilian players, but Venezuela actually has a bunch. It's more of the Caribbean islands that play a lot of baseball. But like in Japan, it's gigantic. In South Korea, it's gigantic. So those markets are still flush with baseball. And regionally, baseball is still big in certain places, obviously.
Sure, and it's like a super local sport in the United States. Like the local markets for most of the baseball teams deeply care, and people go to games, and particularly when the teams are good. But
do you think that the NBA is trending that way?
That is what people say. But the thing about the NBA is that it is the second most popular sport on social media. We've talked about this before.
But it's not like it is the second most popular sport on social media. But how do you convert that into dollars?
There are a lot. I mean, I'm the wrong person to talk about converting things into dollars. That's not generally my specialty. But there are a lot of ways to capture that mind share, and I'm sure they will continue. Like I've been one of the people the whole time that the NBA's dying, no one cares, the stars are resting, yada yada. I've been like, I believe the NBA is more sturdy than a lot of its opponents have said.
I had Greg on the show a few weeks ago when we were talking about the Luka trade. What's that? Sorry?
Greg Ehrenberg?
Yeah, because he had that Rozier tweet from like 3 years ago. So we were talking about that. He's the inside man. He's like, yeah, I'm the inside man. I want $100. I want $100. Great. But he's just like, who cares about like TV ratings? It's not like the NBA is going to be canceled next year. Like the NBA is going to be there. I do think that they do need to solve something as a part of the game. Like they're trying the midseason tournament. That's better, I guess, but it's not like it's drawing huge ratings, or it's not even ratings. It's interest in what's going on. And when the off the court stuff just completely overshadows anything that happens on the court, you might not notice it now. You might not notice in 3 years, but in 10 years, that's kind of what happened to baseball, is that you didn't notice baseball becoming wildly unpopular until it was wildly unpopular. And then you have to start retroactively going back in your mind, like, what the hell happened here?
That is true. And I feel like people are always talking about how unpopular the NBA is. So
but that's not true, because if that was the case, people just stopped talking about it. That's what happened to baseball. There was no, geez, baseball's sure getting ratings are down. People don't like baseball anymore. It's just one day people stopped talking about baseball.
And that certainly has not happened with the NBA. Like, I bet do you think you can name more NBA players or Major League Baseball players? I bet NBA players.
NBA by like a 50-1 ratio.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like baseball, and even that is true for me. Like I can name the ninth guy on the Knicks before I could name the backup catcher for even my favorite team, probably.
Which is funny because I covered baseball full time from 2009 to 2015. I knew every single player in the league. I knew every bullpen rotation, who would come in as the long man for the Milwaukee Brewers if they were down by 7 to eat these innings in super deep leagues where I needed to secure my whip. Like, you needed to know that stuff being a fantasy analyst playing in like 20-person leagues, because those are viable in baseball. And I just one day, like, I'm done. It's when I made golf my full time, not football sport. I'm like, I can't do baseball anymore. I was lucky, but like I started losing interest in it right around the same time that I guess everyone started losing interest in it. That it just didn't become fun to do anymore. And content for baseball was so bad that golf just made so much more sense. And no one was talking about golf, which made it a lot of fun. Now it's funny that you do see a lot of people talking about golf. Maybe I'm just missing it, but I don't see a lot of baseball content.
I don't see a ton of baseball content either. I mean, even for like these, they have these drafts on Underdog, these dingers, they're Major League Baseball best ball. Like, I know I've done a couple shows on it. Pete did one with the Badge Bros, but like, they're people not really, it's $50,000 to first. It's this huge tournament, relatively speaking. And no one really cares.
There's also a weird barrier of entry to baseball too. That's what made I always still think that the best fantasy players, like if you were to judge like your fantasy skill at season long fantasy sports, being really good at fantasy baseball was kind of the proof that you were a good fantasy player, because it was a game that was not necessarily solvable, but it meant that you needed to know what to do. Like, you understood the rules, you understood how to manipulate the rules using all these different positions from all these different teams. It's the longest season that's played out overall. Like, the worst guy in my fantasy football league will win once every 10 years just because he drafted this one guy who, like, he drafted Gronk in year 2 in the 13th round, and Gronk outscored every tight end by 300 points and something stupid like that, and he just wins.
Yeah, fantasy football, I think we are all universally, we can admit, it's like the most luck involved. That's why people like it. That's why it's so popular.
I agree, and people like football way more. Let's not overlook that fact. But we've had this 14-team keeper league throughout the course of the past, I think it's year 16 of it right now. And generally speaking, there's like 6 really good players in the league, and 4 of them make the playoffs every year. I don't think we've ever had a year where more than 4 of that group is out of the playoffs. Now, it's not like I tanked my team twice to get better draft picks, and I do that early, and so my team is great for the next 3 years. But we know the cycle of how that works. And then there's just random dudes with like who made 1 or 2 good picks completely arbitrarily, and it just made them good. I mean, that is, like you said, that's the fun of fantasy football, that you could just draft Lamar Jackson and you have a good fantasy team.
That is both a frustrating thing about fantasy football, where you're like, oh, I drafted a good team, I managed my roster well, but I didn't have the guy that you needed, and certainly a boon. As we record this, breaking news, and it won't be breaking news to the people that come here, but this is very interesting while we're talking about the National Basketball Association. Victor Wembanyama out for the remainder of this NBA season with deep vein thrombosis in his right shoulder, which is fairly interesting because the NBA would have really, really wanted Wemby to be in the playoffs. Even if
I don't think they're, I mean, they were playing it, like, they're not even in the play-in spot right now.
But they made the trade for De'Aaron Fox, which is
sure they could have got there, but they were playing at best, and maybe they sneak through and losing 5 games in the first round to Denver or whoever, or OKC.
The ratings for the Wemby play-in game would have rivaled the Lakers play-in game from.
I do not agree with that. I do not think that's true. If that was the case, they'd be showing San Antonio in primetime every single week.
Okay. I am wrong. I'm going to walk this back. What they would want is they would want a national showcase, one Wemby game. You get some good viral clips, and then, Wembanyama, he's this guy, he's an alien, he's so tall. Oh, I'm interested. I'm more woke to Wemby now, the way that people got woke. Have we talked since Luka got traded to the Lakers, by the way?
We haven't, no.
Adam Silver must have gotten that call and been like, we're fucking saved, man. We are saved. Luka Doncic on the Lakers, our premium franchise, gets a 25-year-old first-team All-NBA for nothing. That doesn't even hurt their roster right now. LeBron's 40 and we get to keep him on TV in the playoffs for even longer now. I mean, Adam, to the point that I wonder if Adam Silver did an Inception style assassination on Nico Harrison, the Dallas. Like, if you were to invent a storyline to generate the most attention you possibly could on the NBA, it would be another superstar decides to come and play for the Lakers, right?
It happens in every generation. So it's
Every
not
generation.
shocking that it happened. And people really forget that some of these guys in NBA, in all sports, but the NBA in particular, like at any given time, 10 of the GMs might be like absolute rockheads.
I would say it's gotten better than it used to be. I'd say like 5.
Sure, but you like people have this vision of an NBA GM that they're cap crunchers. They need to get this guy under the wire. But then other times it's like, oh yeah, this guy like thinks he knows ball and he's going to go get the guy who knows ball. And what Nico Harris is saying, like, oh, in 3 years' time, Luka's going to be 800 pounds and out of the league in like a booze bag or something like that. Let's get rid of him now so we don't have to give him the supermax. Not quite understanding, I guess, how basketball works. And maybe he's right. Maybe he will end up being vindicated because we see this all the time. You have such a stark reaction one way. You're like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Then 3 years' time, it's like, hey, he's kind of right. And no one remembers that part. They'll just know Nico Harris as being an absolute goober for the rest of the time.
What's so interesting about that is Nico Harrison was not even a basketball guy.
He's
Nico
a Nike
Harrison,
guy, right?
Who fucking failed at his job. Who he was Steph Curry's concierge
And he went to Under Armour.
When Steph Curry and it's actually sort of a legendary story about how bad Nico Harrison fumbled the bag and about how Steph Curry ended up going to Under Armour. But basically, Nico Harrison is an upwards failure throughout his life. And he had connections with the Lakers organization. Like, if you really start to read into this stuff, it's actually just so goddamn funny.
He was like a Kobe liaison, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Yes.
Yeah. And he knew Pelinka through that. I'm looking into the deep vein thrombosis in your shoulder.
What did you
migrate if it's in your shoulder? An upper extremity can migrate to the lung, cause a pulmonary embolism. So you have to get that worked out. So I can see why they're shutting him down. No, and it's to the benefit of the Spurs to end up with another high lottery pick. So this sounds bad, but there'd be no reason to ever bring him back after this. Like, hey, let's bottom out again. Now we have Fox. Now we have Wemby. We still kept all of our young guys. We still have all of our draft capital, like our draft capital. And if we can get one other guy on a cheap contract here, maybe all of a sudden next year they skip what the Thunder did last year and like really getting good. And then the next year they're considered a contender. Maybe all of a sudden the Spurs just become a contender the year after because they have all of this depth, all of this young talent, and they could still probably go out and get another cheaper, more expensive, but shorter term veteran rental who's very good. And then all of a sudden you have like the makings of a super team for a few years.
And they kept their pick this year in acquiring Fox.
And all their guys.
Yeah. So I mean, in the end, as long as Wembanyama does fully recover from this, it'll probably end up being a win, a short-term win, maybe not. And actually, really from a macro perspective, all that matters for the NBA and for TV money and all this stuff is the Lakers at least making the conference finals. Lakers make the conference finals, win. Lakers beat the Thunder in the conference finals and play against the Celtics. The league is like laughing. They're doing Tony Montana. They're laughing while sleeping in piles of money. If we get a Lakers Celtics finals.
And you could script it out that for the Lakers' journey to get there, they'd have to beat the Warriors in the first round or something like that. Just make all the primo matchups all the way down the line. You just have they beat the Warriors in the first round, then they have to play Jokic, and then they beat Jokic, and then they have to go play the Thunder and beat the Thunder. Then they can go play the defending champion Celtics, or no, they could play the Knicks.
They could play the Knicks. Knicks would be huge. Yeah. I again, like I said, I'm obviously biased towards the NBA, but I think it is working out for them. You told me you had some notes for me. I don't know how much longer you want to go here, but you told me you had some notes. So let's dive into your notes.
So I listened to your show with Joe, and then I listened to your show with Jack. You need to figure out what you want out of this because it sounds like you don't know. You basically, what I can tell based on the way that you're talking, because I've been through this myself, and you kind of pointed to Pete and I, like we kind of do our thing, and that's just what we do. We kind of do what we want to do. You want to do what you want to do, but you want to have the views, money, and success as someone like Joe, who runs a completely different type of media operation. They just don't go hand in hand.
Okay. So really the main thing that I care about is just having the streaming channel be enough to get by for a while. Yeah, for which it's like it's well honestly it's well on its way. It's growing more than I thought it would. There's like some stuff I can do around the margins. I mostly am just kind of fascinated with the YouTube game. And if this YouTube channel that we are on right now ends up being like a nice secondary stream of revenue and generates partnerships and brads, that would be a bonus. But right now, it's just kind of like Joe was talking about. Like Joe loves the game behind the game, like optimizing and the thumbnails and everything, and he's like really good at it. I find all that stuff very fascinating and interesting.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah,
Like
you do not. You do not. Correct.
No, I hate all that stuff. Like I want best content to win at all times. And obviously that's not going to be the case. So should I be doing more algorithmically in order to enhance my content? Yes, probably. But I'm not 21 anymore. I'm not grinding the same way that I used to be on those margins. Like when I was rigging SEO for my articles in 2011 when I was working at Roto Experts, and Scott Engel accused me of like paying people to click on an article. It's like, no, man, I just used SEO in my title. It's fine. That's why when you Google this keyword, my article pops up. But I never kept up with that the entire time. Like when the algorithm changes, be it on YouTube or Google or whatever it might be, then you just are a step behind. You need someone whose job it is to stay on top of that. And I could see like the puzzle that Joe likes about that in order to like, hey, what can I do to get to the top of this? Because you always have to be trying new things because everything changes so often. But I just wanted to focus on my content, and I didn't even want to do content that people really even want to watch anymore. Like if that was the case, I would still be doing, here's my rankings debate show for fantasy football week number 7. Here is my waiver wire pickups. Not that I don't do that stuff, but it's all short form, and everyone knows that's a throwaway show for me. Like you can tell what I like to do if you tune into the Pat Mayo Experience. Like I filmed with Rob and Cam today, 9 questions, the 9 biggest questions on the NFL offseason, which we did talk about, but it took us 17 minutes to get there because we were talking about hotels in Vegas.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I love that stuff too. The thing is with YouTube in particular, and you are on YouTube obviously, but like the actual podcast feed itself is more valuable and more clicked on than
Yeah,
the
so
YouTube.
but that's strange though, because that is true. It's about 10 times bigger, 10 to 20 times bigger audio feed between Apple and Spotify. My RSS feed is probably the best asset that I own because there are so many subscribers to it being in existence for 15 years. However, the video gets me paid because
Yeah.
people see my studio. This isn't if people are watching on the Takecast right now YouTube channel, which you should all do, this is my house. Like this is my like random studio that I have to do these guest hits. My actual studio, like the production value of that studio is so high that even if my numbers are lower than competitors who also do videos, brands like being associated with my show because it looks professional.
100%. Yeah. And I'm not saying the YouTube is not part of it, but in order to get, if you're starting from a lower block, if you're or just later, right? The content market is so saturated just across the board, right? Just not fantasy football, not whatever, just like
Anything, but
content in
it's
general.
harder to find now. But because so many people are doing it, this has been the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Is that I remain the same, but so many people entered the space that I look a lot better now than I ever did because there's so much bad
So
content.
much bad shit. Yeah,
Like people
100%.
are
And
bad at it, and
no, I
like I
think
didn't get
that's
any
very
better.
true.
I just stayed the same, and the overall talent pool just got worse.
1 million%. And I think my opinion, and Joe probably wouldn't agree with this, but like specifically for the streaming channel, I went from 0 to 5,000 in 4 months or whatever. for the streaming stuff. And that was with getting a late start like I didn't start streaming until July of last fantasy football season. Now, and you know this, I'm sure, just from your own exhibitions, people are more likely to click on something that has the appeal to authority. Like you're scrolling around YouTube, what am I going to click on? Someone with 318 subscribers. Like maybe I like the title, maybe I like the thumbnail, but I do a quick cursory glance. Like, I'm not going to watch that. I'm more likely to click on something that has, oh, this already has 1,800 views in 16 hours, and this account has 7,000 subscribers, not 138 subscribers. So I think there is likely going to be a positive cascading effect for me this offseason. Maybe I'm wrong, but that is what my current imagination is for that thing specifically.
I would tend to agree with that about the habits, but I don't really care and look into what the habits are. Like if I was really doing this like I am doing it seriously, it's my profession. But if I really wanted to optimize what I was doing, like I wouldn't have my golf show, football show, and UFC show
On the
all on
same
the same
channel.
channel. They'd be on 3 separate channels, and I'd have to restart a little bit and grow them out, but they would ultimately be more successful that way in attracting new people. Because I've heard you say this a bunch of times. I'm curious to know why you think this. You've talked about the Google algorithm and just say that YouTube is the best search engine in the world. Now, obviously you heard that from someone. Do you know if that's actually true?
Of course not. Of course not. I will say it's also true. I've heard someone say it, and it's also true in my personal experience.
Okay. So anecdotally, it is true, and you've heard other people say it, so it must be true.
It's got to be, yeah. And now, it also would define. You could ask yourself, what do you mean by best search engine? Because I'm sure there are some people who would say, well, actually, ChatGPT is, or actually, Perplexity is. What I do know is that at least for the people who it behooves to tell you this, is that YouTube is at least the most used search engine. Again, this is literally just something I've heard people say, but also anecdotally, Google never the fuck finds me what I wanted to find anymore. I basically have abandoned using it.
Yeah, it's not been good. So some of the other notes that I made, I had never heard Jack speak before. I was pretty unfamiliar with him until it's funny that he's probably so much bigger than all of us combined. And I just
like you wouldn't believe, like you would not.
No, I get it. Cause I went and looked into him after, like, holy shit, this guy's doing a ton. But just it didn't really ever come across my radar kind of thing. I'm an old man. This is what happens. But I thought that the way he talked about making content and what he wants to do with it now, like story-based stuff, not just being like, like he said, where's the best international game? Like not the top 5 cities for an international game, but like, what is the experience of going to a London game or a Munich game? It reminded me a lot of, I worked at Sportsnet magazine when I first got out of college and like doing feature writing for their print magazine. And he talked a lot like how people would talk at the magazine and coming up with features, which I thought was a really cool link between old media and new media.
100%. YouTube now has kind of replaced it's the vein of like Sports Illustrated and like written features are now video essays, right? Something that 25 years ago you would have been like, you and I both love The Simpsons, like some feature length thing about The Simpsons and like researching it and like, odes to Johnny Carson in The Simpsons, or how Johnny Carson impacted The Simpsons, of which, of course, there are many, many ways in which Johnny Carson impacted The Simpsons. But that would have been a 7-page article in Variety, and now it's a 17-minute YouTube video. So I do think Jack is very much picking up on the hole that magazines do not fill in the United States anymore.
I thought that was a really cool angle, and that's a really unique angle and a really smart way to think about it. But one thing that I found when you've been talking through all this is my big thing for you. When you're talking to these people or talking to whoever about it, you need to stop talking about the hacks that you can do to get ahead, but you need to be talking to them about how they build their business and how they make that sustainable. Because if you can have a sustainable business, the hacks don't matter, because you have money coming in and it's more than the money that you're putting out. Like, that's really what it boils down to. How do you do that? Like, even to hear Jack talk about the budget for each of his. So you know how much money he is making per one of these videos. If he wasn't making that much money per one of those videos, well, then the budget isn't there for those videos. Like, you have to start thinking more about those things. I think like that's one thing that I did when I first started Mayo Media, was just like, I basically had my balance sheet out. It's like, how much can I pay Paul? How much can I pay myself? How much is studio space? How much is equipment versus what's the sponsorship that at the time DraftKings was paying me? What is Underdog paying me? How much am I getting for my mid rolls? How much was Run the Sims bringing in for me? How much is Fantasy National bringing in for me? And how is that going to influence the content schedule that I have, and treating it like a business rather than treating it like, oh, here's what I like to do. And then you can start to merge those things and make the things that you like to do your business, if that makes sense.
100% it makes sense. Frankly, my overhead is zero in terms of like my overhead. I have no employees. I guess I pay Zach very relatively small amounts of money to do some video editing, to do some graphics and things like that, but not a high dollar amount, not something that would make the bottom line for Mayo Media, right? And the money coming in is not exorbitant, but it is also, again, it's fine. My hope would be that that is a very temporary stage for me in terms of the money coming in being fine, that I will soon have to start making decisions about that. But you are 100% correct that the right way to think about YouTube, the right way to think about Patreon, the right way to think about Run the Sims, the right way to think about all this stuff is as a business, and how do I grow the business or streamline the business or create greater profits in the business, as opposed to the hacks that you really couldn't be more correct.
Like that, the hacks are the cherry on top. Like, they can lead, like, that's phase two. It's like when you have the underpants gnomes, step one, underpants, step three, profit. What's step two? Well, step two are actually the hacks. Like, once you're at a level, like if I started implementing all these hacks, I could probably grow my show a lot more. So I probably should pay someone to do that for me. Like,
I did. I told you this. Yeah, I told you. You make Mayo Industries makes enough money to not have to do thumbnails from a guy who likes you.
Yeah, but our thumbnail, we have the best thumbnails. It's not even close.
I do not disagree. They're
we
very
have
good.
An entire show at the end of the year basically dedicated to what were the best thumbnails of the year.
I bet that if you hired a guy, a professional guy who's like his job to drive people to click.
This guy is a professional at doing art. He just happens to do our stuff.
I would bet that if you hired a YouTube professional.
Like, okay, so how would you, okay, well, let's say this then. What does my thumbnail look like for my show if I pay someone to do it? What's it look like? Just go to my page right now, Mayo Media Network. You will see today's show that came out the day that we're recording this. It's a show I did with Rob and Cam. It's an inspiration that I gave him. It's us as the fabulous Freebirds from the 80s.
It is very good. I would just say that you are probably in general not getting great clicks from anyone who does not know who you are. That would just be my guess. That would just be my guess.
So what does 9 biggest questions of the NFL offseason thumbnail look like to you then? If I was to hire a YouTube thumbnail professional.
Well, buddy, I'm not good at this. If I was,
I don't even know where to start. Like, this was my idea. Is it a picture of Aaron Rodgers with bug eyes?
Well, the first thing is that I've learned is you really want high resolution photos. You basically want the thumbnails to be in 4K as much as possible. That is like the big thing right now.
Why?
And that's just what makes people want to click on it. I don't know.
How can you tell if you're on your phone and you go through YouTube? How can you tell a picture is in 4K?
It also might be something that YouTube is
like algorithmically.
Algorithmically picking up on. Yeah,
people have told me that if I upload my shows in 4K, it'll be better for the algorithm. Apparently, this is what someone told me. I have no idea if that's true.
Right.
Rather than just in standard 1080. But do you know how much time it takes? Like, so what we could do is we could film in 1080 and export in 4K, or like I have good enough cameras that I could film in 4K and export in 4K. Now, in order to film something in HD that like we do now and export it in HD and upload it, even for the Jeff and Tim show that takes around 3 hours to record, an hour and a half to export, and then let's say 15 minutes to upload, and then it processes in YouTube for a bit. If I was to do that in 4K, it would be like a 20-hour process.
I mean,
I
it might
don't see
not
how
be.
that's helping me.
I would guess if you like consulted with one of these people, they would tell you a much clearer explanation than I could of like, this is why it will help you. It will do this, this, and this for your business, which will allow you to do this, this, and this. And the margins at your level of YouTube will increase by 4.6%, which will allow you to get to this level of brand deal instead of this level of brand deal. And in the end, it will have paid for itself 5x over or whatever.
Would it surprise you that I have more profitable brand deals than people that are way bigger than me?
No, because you have a hyper fixated gambling audience, which is the number one audience you want to have. The number one audience you could have is young men 18 to 35 who like to gamble.
And
That's where I
that
see
is
it
not
all.
my demographic, by the way.
Are you
I
old?
actually had to submit this as a proposal for, I believe that PXG is coming on. Oh, and by the time this has happened, I believe I have re-signed with Underdog.
There we go.
So
Good,
that's
good
good
news.
But I had to
That's what
provide
we
all
love
this
to hear.
information, like, average view duration, just like, because it's always difficult. Like with like Holka, with what he's doing, like his entire business is predicated on first time depositors, which that's all of these sites want, right? And you get such a big payout for that. And if you can constantly find a new stream of first time depositors, obviously that's going to be the biggest thing that you can do. That generates so much revenue. But for me, I'm not finding a whole bunch of new people all the time. Like I am, but I'm not. Like I'm gaining more than I lose, but there's not a huge churn of people. Like the people that have been with me for a while now. Then you grow very steadily throughout the years. I'm not just dropping a TikTok video that's getting 100K views, and it could be 99.8% new people for the first time ever seeing me. Like having that at my disposal would be amazing. But what I've done is cultivated an audience that will participate with me on things, be it underdog entries or golf pools or whatever. Like just even like having the one and done business wise for me is so influential to everyone that I go talk to. It's like, here is this tournament that has my name on it. There's $1 million guaranteed. It's $250 to play for the year, which for some is a lot of money. For someone else, it's not a lot of money, but it takes 4,500 people to fill it, and it fills every year. Not a problem. And it fills early. Like being able to point to that, people are like, oh, well, if you have like 4,500 people that will invest $250 into this thing, even though it's a raked one and done contest, I bet you they would buy other things too. And those are valuable customers to have, valuable listeners to have. I'm very grateful for that. That's one of the reasons that I haven't tried to get too much into the hacks or changed up my thumbnails, because I want my audience always to come back, and I want to make content for me, because it's content that I would want to consume. And I have enough people now that it's going to be really hard to grow. But I want to make sure that the people that like my show continue to like my show over and over, and give them thumbnails that they'll enjoy, which is like tag teams from the 80s.
Well, and so like there's also this thing of you found your level and you like it. You like the shows you do. You like the guests you get. You like the amount of time in a day you work. You like the ability to do this. You like the ability to do that. You like the brands you partner with. You're comfortable with that. That's totally fine.
That's not to say that I don't want to level up. P.T. Anderson had the great quote after doing Magnolia that, just because I make weird movies about cancer doesn't mean that I don't want the same audience as Steven Spielberg has. Like, I'm the same way. I would love to be Joe Rogan. You know what I mean? But being able to do what I do.
So that would require a change in your strategy. I mean,
no, not necessarily. I think the change in strategy has nothing to do with hacks or anything like that, because most of those people are pump and dump type customers, right? I'm building an audience, and that's what the most valuable thing is. Like having a big audience and a loyal audience is so much more valuable than having people come in and go. Because what happens in 2 years' time? When, like, let's say 5 years from now, I continue to do the show, it stays at the same level. Well, I still have that same level of audience. That's always going to be valuable. It's not like my first time depositors are drying up and then I have nothing left over and I have to pivot to a different business. I don't need to do that. I can keep doing what I'm doing as long as I continue to be good at what I'm doing and deliver on what I say that I'm going to do for the audience to continue to come back to me. But if you put me on, I don't know, if you just aired mine and Jeff's show on Golf Channel, well, it would make our show go through the roof 100x, because that's a bigger platform. Like, it's the platforming I need, not so much like the discoverability, because I just don't think that's possible with my show.
Well, YouTube is a bigger platform than the golf channel.
but it's not for what I need. Like there are very few people sticking around for the Mexico Open being like, man, here's a 1 hour and 43-minute show on YouTube about the Mexico Open bets and one and done.
You know, frankly, this is what I would tell you, and you're not going to do it, so like whatever. But if I got hired to consult with Mayo Media Network, I actually would tell you that the golf shows should all be on their own channel. No football, no whatever.
I
No
agree
nonsense.
with you, but
Yeah,
what I was thinking about doing was branching out all of the shows that I can have golf and
a lot of
football.
work.
What's that? It is
lot
a
of
lot of
work.
work, but I could say that Mayo Media Network is actually the Pat Mayo Experience channel, and the Dogger Pass is its own channel, and Fantasy Golf Degenerates is its own channel, or some combination of that. Then I could have golf and football on mine because I wouldn't want to make it hard for people to find me at the same time. Like, yes, my views might go up on certain shows, but other people might get left in the dust because they don't like the amount of people that I still get. They'd be like, oh my God, Pat Mayo's still around? I haven't seen your show in 8 years since you left fantasy. Like, just because you
Yep.
tell someone that, hey, I have a new YouTube channel, doesn't mean they know you have a new YouTube channel. That's why Joe's talk about getting people to the newsletter is so key, because he's right about that. Like, I always try to get pushed. Like, I have 26,000 people on my personal newsletter now. Like, I can tell that, like, I don't think that's all. Like, listen, if that was the case, then I'd have 26,000 people tuning into every YouTube video, which is not the case. So it's not like they're all super engaged fans, but they're people who are who did enough to sign up and want to hear what I have to say, that I do have a direct line to them. Like, I remember when we launched the Prop Sniper at Run the Sims, like the biggest day of business we ever did besides day one was the day the Prop Sniper came out. I wrote an email that we had this new product and sales went through the roof.
That, yeah, I mean, obviously that should become part of my diet, my work diet, as it were. But yeah, I mean, I think you are in your business, your empire is in an interesting spot where, you know, it's actually built on a pre-YouTube infrastructure, basically.
It's built a lot like old radio.
Yeah.
Like drive time radio.
And obviously, like, of course, there's still a huge appetite for you and for what you talk about and what you do. But certainly, I would not say there's nothing that could grow your audience on YouTube could be grown. I think you're saying it couldn't be, and I'm saying it definitely could, that your discoverability could go to a new tier, in my opinion.
It could, but I can't do it without, like you said, creating the, like, just me having so much conflicting content on my channel hurts my channel.
Yes, although I still think that even without creating the secondary new layers of doing this, that, or the other, doing a couple interesting things, because at the end of the day, the draw of the Mayo Media Network is you, right? It's people like you. People like to listen to you. Yeah, maybe they like Jeff, maybe they like Cam, maybe they like Andrew Cuss, whatever.
Well, that's the whole thing. I wanted to populate the network with people who, like, if you liked me, you'll like these other people too, like Paul and Cody on their show, Byron and Kenny on their show. Like, just having, like, I wanted mine to be a fun place where people consume fantasy, betting, whatever it might be, with people that are actually fun to listen to, not just a bunch of, like, absolute cronies reading off a script in their basement. Like, hello, here are the stats for today.
No, I completely agree. But I think even within those confines, so even as you've defined it, that this is the show, I'm not willing to compromise on what the show is. I think there is a second tier of discoverability if you wanted to act. That is based on my casual observation of researching kind of what works on YouTube, my own channel, seeing what happens when I get outside of just best ball fantasy football on Underdog, and going outside of that, and talking to Joe, talking to Jack, talking to Peter, and just seeing what works for other people's YouTube channels, seeing what these big YouTube channels, what they do, what they cover. Because some of the biggest YouTube channels do not just serve one thing, one topic, one niche.
Sure, but they're also not long form, basically audio podcasts that are recorded.
I think I really, it's so funny, man. I told Hulk I don't like this guy, Chris Williamson. And
Never.
He's I don't know, the fourth biggest podcaster in the world, maybe fourth or fifth. But
sure. What does he talk about?
Well, that's the thing. If I was to try and distill the podcast is called Modern Wisdom. It's just as douchey as you would think, right? It's lots of like business and this is how you optimize. This is how you. But he also has like a lot. The ones I've listened to, he's got like health and fitness guys on. So he's got notable Canadian bodybuilder Chris Bumstead. He's had on Dr. Mike Israetel. He had on David Goggins. So these are the ones that I've listened to. But he also has a lot of these business douches on that I don't care near as much about. But his YouTube channel is huge. And it's just long, I mean, really long form, like 3-4 hour conversations of just two people sitting in a desk chatting. Right? And obviously it's really well lit. It looks really nice and everything. But it's not just one thing. It's not just one niche. And he's done a lot, obviously, for YouTube optimization specifically.
Sure, but does he have other shows on his channel, or is it just his show?
Well, let's look. I mean, he is the primary speaker in all of them. So that is, I guess that it's.
So maybe that's the move for me. Just separate all of my shows into their own channel. Keep Mayo Media as the Pat Mayo Experience channel and siphon off all the other ones. I'm thinking about getting into Rumble too. I think we talked about that last time. I still haven't got around to doing that yet. Although I had Tommy G back on. I think we're going to start a podcast together.
You and Tommy G?
Yeah. Like we work really well together. Like we have the perfect, like the perfect, like we have the same sense of humor, which really works out well. And I talked to him about it. I was like, look, like this can't be crazy. He's like, I don't want to do crazy. I don't want to do betting. He's like, I think I'll still do my crazy stuff, but with me and you, we'll just like keep it light and keep it like fun. Like he's like, we could even like lean into my conspiracy bit. Like we can do like, you know, the funniest conspiracy, like our birds are not real. Like talk about fun stuff like that, not the crazy stuff.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it would do that probably would actually not help with your discoverability because YouTube.
No, it's not going to be Pat Mayo Experience. It's not going to be on Mayo Media Network. We'll just start like our own, just
Totally
talk
separate.
for an hour once every 2 weeks type thing. Because I think that those are the like organic. Like I do want to try new things. I actually had this for you and even for me as a project. Just start a new YouTube channel, and like all you would need to do, create a new shorts channel. It's just shorts, and take your last two shows with Holka and Jack and cut out the 30-second YouTube hacks from each of those and label them and title them and make a thumbnail for them or do whatever. And you probably would have, Jesus, I don't know, like 70, like 30-second clips about YouTube hacks from each of those two shows. Start a YouTube channel called YouTube Hacks or SEO Hacks and just put up once a day, title it properly and see if that works. I'd be very curious.
I'd be curious too. I mean, the thing is though, is I'd probably have to edit them instead of just tossing them in Opus. And then that becomes a whole time suck in and of itself.
Well, you want to grow your business, Davis? I remember when I worked 20 hours a day, every day.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is the streaming stuff is obviously it's very time intensive. It just literally just requires a lot of time. Not to say it's impossible, but I'd have to do some carving, which I guess I could do.
Yeah, you most definitely could do that. If anyone out there is a YouTube specialist or an SEO specialist, and you do want to work with the Mayo Media Network, email mayomediainc@gmail.com and get at me. I'm open to the conversation. It's just I've always done everything myself, and I don't know how to do this. And even when I try to research it, I find it confusing. I find it overwhelming. So then I just don't do it. So if I did have someone who could do it at a reasonable cost, like I can't be paying someone like $300,000 to do this for me, because then it's, again, not worth it for me to do it. But if it's something that like we can talk about, come up with a strategy, short clips on different platforms, and I'd be all over that if someone else could do it, but I need to hear it from someone first. Like in theory, great idea. Everything you're talking about. How do I do that? No fucking idea.
I mean, yeah, you would probably have to hire like a strategist, and hopefully your strategist would have thumbnail, like they could do that. Like they were a thumbnail artist and really well versed in the YouTube meta. I mean, I'm sure that person exists. I know that Establish the Run has hired like a YouTube like guru effectively.
They have a lot more money than me.
They do have a lot more money than you, and they just keep winning more of it in the contest as well. So that tends to be pretty helpful.
Say it
But
again. Sorry, I clicked on YouTube and my own show started playing in my face.
they also keep winning money in the contests as well, so that's nice. Like they had a lot of money to begin with. The business had a lot of money. It's a profitable business, and then they get in the streets and, continue to win the aforementioned money.
Yeah, Establish the Run has slightly fewer subs than I do.
There you go. That's how it's done.
But I wonder, I bet you their videos perform better than mine. They do perform better than mine, by and large.
Their thumbnails are very good. Their titles are very good. You'll see their titling echoes whatever the most popular thing of the day is. I bet their click-through rate and their engagement rates are quite good.
Yeah, it's funny because you can tell that this is someone is doing this, and it's not like Levitan sitting in his house putting these up. But here's what I don't like about it. Just looking at their channel, so their last like uploaded video that they have, I'm sure they must have like live streams. Yeah, that's where most of the. It doesn't seem like they've actually uploaded anything in a while. Maybe they have different like branches of like Establish the Run golf and everything like that, because if they've hired someone, they probably are doing that. The last like uploaded video that they have is from 2 weeks ago. We love these 15 Super Bowl props, Chiefs versus Eagles in parentheses, 13,000 views from 2 weeks ago. It's 30 minutes long. The one before that is the NFL rigged, with Adam Schefter, has 4,000 views.
Because the audience for this channel does not
get
want
that, but that's still crazy that you have Adam Schefter on a show with you, and that's not the highest rated thing that you do.
Well, remember, they also have the podcast feed, and I would assume they're in a similar spot to you, where the podcast feed is quite big.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because I always see them on like the Apple charts. It's like me, JJ, and Establish the Run are always like jockeying for position.
Yeah. So I don't know, but I would assume their audience is not wanting to tune in to a 36-minute conversation between Levitan and Schefter.
But that's what I would want to hear.
That's what I would want to hear as well. The ETR YouTube videos are not made for you and I.
I suppose that's true. Maybe I could even start doing like short form content, and there's a lot to think about with this sort of stuff. And now that I'm back with Underdog for a few years, that I actually have a little bit of runway in order to try to experiment with some of these things, get some of those first time depositors, Davis, because that's really the key. Although I made a big pitch to them about like, listen, like I've built a community now. Like I got a lot of first time depositors, but I also ran this props pool. Like that's been the hardest part. And I believe you and Joe talked about this a little bit, but the hardest metric to actually put, now Pete and I was on Pete's After Dark channel, and we talked about this a little bit, that yeah, first time depositors are great and everything. But what if you've already like you've got a whole bunch of first time depositors and people continue to play because of you? So that customer is now more valuable because they're constantly playing. And because I came to Underdog late after being at DraftKings for so long, that a lot of my audience simply had Underdog accounts already. How many of those have I re-engaged to start playing Underdog? It's unquantifiable. How do you know that? I would like to figure out a way to make that a metric. Like they should give you a second time depositor code or something like that. Like, oh, like here's this guy who deposited 5 years ago. He didn't play. Why is he playing again? It's like, oh, he started watching Mayo show, and Mayo's talking about Underdog. Like, I feel like that would be a valuable metric to have.
I remain legitimately surprised anytime someone tells me that they use my first time deposit code. So it's like, how did you find me and you don't know who Peter is, or you don't know who Mayo is, or you don't know who JJ is? I find it legitimately surprising. Now, there is literally no person on YouTube who spends more time broadcasting on Underdog than me. I am number one probably by a factor of 3 or 4. So that is nice, and I am always engaging with their platform. But yeah, the first time depositor game is if you are not doing what Joe does, or actually what Jack does, where Jack is just reaching this huge fucking audience.
Yeah.
There's just this huge audience. And it's the first time depositor game is tough, obviously.
Yeah, it is. And like Joe and Sal and all those guys are so good at it. And I'm very envious of it because I would love to have I'm like you. I want to have the everything of every world, but eventually you do have to figure out what you like to do and pick your lane and just become good at that.
100%. Yeah. It's
last thing for you.
Hit me.
I had to buy a heating pad before I run.
Because you're an old
put it
man.
in the microwave. and heat up my calves before I run.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how old I am now.
I get tremendous calf pain running, although I've now been running enough this year that it's starting to go away a little bit.
Okay, well, those are two different pains. Mine are not pained because I'm like running really fast for like the first 2 months. My calves like just seize up due to dehydration, not being stretched enough, not being warmed up properly. That I really have to warm up and stretch now, or I'm screwed.
Does changing your hydration or stretching or do anything help? Like, if you tried to stretch or hydrate differently, or you're just like, whatever?
I mean, I always default to whatever, but I do try to. I do drink a lot of water. I just happen to drink a lot of coffee at the same time, so it really kind of sucks it all out of your body. But I probably drink like 4. I don't know how much is that. Like, I'm trying to think of my Gatorade bottle. You know those green Gatorade bottles? Or those 32 ounces? I have no idea what ounces are, but like if they're like a liter each, I probably drink like a gallon of water a day.
That should be more than enough, particularly if you.
But I also drink like 5 of these.
I mean, the water in coffee.
Coffee should be fine, but the caffeine sucks it out of you.
Well, it's such a diuretic that actually you're just pissing it straight out.
Oh, I had to. Okay, here's something funny. I started doing a live show on Fridays. I've already scrapped the idea just because I don't want to be like live at 9:30 a.m. my time on a Friday. I'd rather. I honestly, that's what I'm really like. I'm going to release this on a Friday on my podcast feed, and I'll probably just put this audio after it comes out on the Takecast. I don't want to dupe your video, bro, on YouTube because that's never good. That I know in terms of searchability and things like that. But I did a live show and I was just getting ready for it. It was the first one I did. I think I had Leone and Sia that day talking about the AFC Championship or whatever it was. And I went to the gym before, so I ended up drinking like 3 liters of water or something. I had a bunch of coffee. We get like 16 minutes into this live show and I have to pee so badly that I call for a break because we have a live commercial that we have to run because I need to have these embedded mid-rolls into my YouTube videos and we have to run them live during the live shows. I can't just go put them in post like I'll be doing for this show. So when I go and do that, it's a 45-second ad. I have to take everything off, dart out the door, basically piss out the door of the studio and get back on camera before it comes back. I was like, okay, I got to stop like drinking water and drinking coffee before I do these live shows. I once interviewed Jim Ross, good old JR. And I asked him, he's like, you're doing WrestleMania for like 6 straight hours. How do you not go to the bathroom? He's like, diaper.
Diaper's gnarly.
That makes sense.
That's gnarlier than just peeing in a Gatorade bottle.
That's the trucker move, peeing in a Gatorade bottle.
Yeah. I just leave my show on and go pee. I mean, I'm on for like 4 hours, so no one really. I have a whole bathroom down there, so I just leave for 45 seconds and go pee.
See, you should have like a bathroom bit, like something that you bring up on the screen, like Davis has to pee, create some song for it. I do want to tell you, although I find the conversations that you had with Jack and Joe very fascinating, I think you need to lean away from only like how to make my YouTube better content.
Yeah, I mean, it basically that just happened. Like basically, it just happened that Joe had that date available because he was traveling after that, and then I'd also lined that up with Jack, and it just was what it was. I mean, who knows? Then I guess we touched on it here at the end, so people are probably fucking sick of hearing about YouTube. They're ready.
Yeah, well, I intentionally started with other things before I wanted to talk about that because I personally find that stuff fascinating, but that's also my job. And right. I'm friends with Joe, so I like to hear what Joe has to say, and I was very interested in what Jack had to say about it. But if you don't do that for a living, like, why would you care?
Correct. Yes. So next week, one of your favorite fantasy football washouts probably will be back. I don't know who, but someone will be back with you guys next week.
Like, I love hearing you and Brick talk and you and Pete talk. Like, those are my favorite takecasts.
Yes. Well, here's the deal. Brick
and I would bet that I'm one of the more popular guests on your audio feed, but not on your video feed.
That is true. Yes. Based on my anecdotal observation, when you've been on the YouTube show, it's like 800, 900 views, which is what's whatever. But yes, the audio downloads for you are higher. Yeah.
And that makes sense because most of my audience is on audio, and I'm not coming on to like when you title this like Pat talks about Mulholland Drive. It's like, oh my god, what is
I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna YouTube title this. I'll have to.
what
I'll
can
have
we
to
what
get
can we
in the
do?
lab.
YouTube
Well,
hacks.
we literally started it with Mulholland Drive, so it's gonna be something Mulholland Drive, David Lynch. So, I'll have to get in the lab. Frankly, the
What else
lab
can
will
we
have to be in.
content as magazines? That is the NBA dead?
Is the NBA? I think
Will soccer ever be popular in the USA? Why is Pat terrified that America is going to bomb Canada? That would probably do really well, actually.
Mulholland Drive live from the 51st state. There you go. Done.
There it
Bang.
is.
It's perfect.
Gotta tell you, I don't love the 51st state stuff. I know it should be funny. I just don't like it.
Well,
I don't like it at all.
I
It makes me nervous.
from your yeah, I was gonna say from your position, can't feel that good.
But I can see how from the other way it's funny. But from my end, like I said, it makes me nervous.
Well, yeah, it's the bully versus the bullied. That's where we're at. We're the bully, and yeah, I hate it, and I hope none of it ever comes to pass, and I hope that this is something that we can laugh about after Donald Trump's 4th or 5th term, whenever he decides to turn it over to Barron.
I remember what I wanted to on that section. I totally forgot to mention this. The one weird thing that has come out of all of this is, and I very much doubt that Americans are like fluent on Canadian politics and what's going on up here. They know they hate Trudeau.
Yes.
That's one thing. That's one thing they know. Trudeau stepped down from being prime minister. Like he's still currently the prime minister, but he announced he's stepping down. So I don't think that Americans know that at the moment.
Yeah,
so
Polyev.
PP. The guy looks like Milhouse from The Simpsons.
Yeah, he likes Bitcoin. I read. So
he likes a lot of things. That he likes to float some stuff out there, but he was, I believe, minus 1,500. The Conservatives were minus 1,500 to win the next election because the Liberals have been in power for 4 straight terms now since 2015. Trudeau has been prime minister and the Liberals have won every single time. Now, albeit they're down to a minority government that's being held together in parliament with the New Democratic Party, which is the more far lefter party, although they don't act that way anymore. But their coalition is keeping the government together right now. It's currently prorogued. I know that most Americans don't know what any of these words mean, but that's just how it's going. And it's just, people are sick of Trudeau. Everyone's sick of Trudeau. Even liberals are sick of Trudeau. Like, it's just been too long.
Right.
Like, you just eventually get sick of someone winning elections. Like, fuck this guy. Like, let's move on. So a lot of Polyev is like, axe the tax and like all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And weirdly, so the Liberals dead in the water. They didn't even know if they would come in 3rd place in the election. And I don't know how sticky this is going to be in terms of polling. But since this Trump stuff happened, Polyev did not have as forceful of a response to Trump, the tariffs and everything, as I think he underrated that for all the division in Canada between left and right. And it's not as stark as it is in America, but it is happening. There are a lot of like big wedge issues between, let's call it the center left and center right, but you're hearing more from like the super left and super right when you hear about these things, where most people don't actually, especially here, don't exist in either of those. It's more like slightly center left, and then shades from that end up going out as it pertains to the Canadian populace. But this like now feels like we're being attacked, whether it be trade war, whether it's the annexation talks. Canadians are like kind of all on the same page as we all don't like this. And Polyev, I think, miscalculated that, whereas Trudeau came out forcefully back, because he's still the prime minister at the moment, like, here's what we're going to do. And he got, Trump off our backs for a month, but like he's been very active. Even the former conservative prime minister before Trudeau came out and said, basically, I don't care if it would make every Canadian poor. We are not handing over Canada. Like, that's the sort of shit that people wanted to hear. And
that should be obvious. I'm embarrassed.
It is, but he didn't do it. He kind of like sucked off Trump a little bit, and people were like, I don't like that. Don't like that one bit. And it made him seem
rule
weak.
Number 1. Yeah.
Well, it made him seem weak for the first time because everyone just, Trudeau, weak, Trudeau's a sissy. Like, those are sort of like the right-wing comments launched. He's a pretty boy, all this stuff. But when it came time for tough talk, Trudeau stood up there and talked tough back. I don't know what the fuck happened behind closed doors. Trudeau's probably like, yeah, just don't worry about it, Donald. It'll be fine. But optically, it made Trudeau look a lot better but he's not running again. So now there's a leadership race, and the new guy that they brought in was the head of the Bank of Canada, and he was the head, or he's one of the guys running. And he was the head of the Bank of England as well. So he's like an economist. People were like, oh, this guy's not so bad. He seems like a grown up. He's not like Tredeau. And all of a sudden, the polls have like closed again. People are like, what is happening? Like, this was a guaranteed election win for the Conservatives. And they probably still win. And because it probably swings back the other way once, if all of this turns out to be a non-factor, not a big deal. But it is very curious that Trump may have swung Canada back to the left versus when it was going to go right.
No, that is really interesting. And that is one of the unintended consequences of populism. You might be very popular in your own country, but other people start to actively hate you. And Americans, by and large, are not really used to that. For a little while during George Bush, right? But everyone loves Obama. Americans
no one dislikes Americans. That's the thing. Like, I don't think the Canadians have any vitriol to American people. We like American people. You guys are exactly the same as us. Like to the T. It's
I get that. Yeah, but people.
But it feels like American, like just American people right now, like when they hear about like some of the sentiment coming out of Canada, they do feel like it's directed towards them. And I can assure you it's not. Like, no one has any problems with Americans. It's just the American government is, we don't like what's happening right now as it pertains to our country. Like, you can do whatever you want to do. That's going to happen either way. Like, legislatively within your own country, we can't control that. That's out of our hands. We might not like agree with it, but it's not our country. So what the fuck do we care? But once you start talking about taking over our country, that's a unifier up here, because Canadians, by and large, like being Canadian, like being proud.
It'd be a unifier anywhere, right?
I agree. And like even like the Danish people are like this now, with them talking about taking over Greenland,
which is absurd. Yeah.
I mean, it's not. I all these places, you control Panama, you control the trade, and you cut deficits, and you can charge other countries whatever you want, and you have free flow of trade, cutting down money coming back in from every other country. You take over Canada, you get access to all these resources that you don't have, therefore you don't have to pay for them anymore. On the other side, you can just take over Greenland, which has a very similar amount of resources in that way. Like, it's very calculated. I mean, I get it, but that's just not really how the world works. At least that's not how we thought the world worked.
Well, it's how the world used to work. And
yeah, when we thought that maybe we were past it, I guess we're going back to it.
We're going back to imperialism. Yeah. So whoever has the most guns, whoever has the most resources, yeah, we are back to guns, germs, and steel here in the I guess the Western world. What a fucking terrifying specter to loom over all of us that is.
One of the weird things I thought about, like when the tariff talk came in, like there's so much stuff that we produce here that we just send to the United States. Like, we'll manufacture stuff here and send it to the States. And a lot of the manufacturing plants in like Ohio and Iowa and all those places, like, are like, they're just directly south of Ontario. So Southern Ontario has a lot of car manufacturing or whatever sort of manufacturing it is, and we'll make part of it here and then send it down. And through free trade, it all works itself out. And they're like, oh, we'll manufacture everything in America now. Well, you guys simply don't have the plants for it. It's not like you just spring up manufacturing plants overnight. Like, that takes time.
No, there's a reason why things are not made in the United States of America.
Well, you either get us to do it with free trade and we just send it down to you, or you just outsource it to China or someplace that does it for pennies.
I hope someone has some solutions, because it all starts to tie your head in a pickle, and you're like, well, just no one knows fucking anything, and it's all just a mess. And I gotta say, as someone who has generally cared a lot about politics in my life and has really not cared nearly as much in like the last 2.5 years, it's all very exhausting. And it's just like, God damn, there are just no adults anywhere. That's the thing. That, to me, I guess, is the thing that gets, is there's no one who's actually interested in problem solving or coming up with good policy. It's just all party lines, populism, bullshit. And the good people of Canada should not have to suffer because America, with all of its inherent advantages, cannot sort their shit out politically.
I mean, a lot of it's a responsibility on us too, like, especially when the tariffs came in, that like, hey, maybe our entire economy shouldn't be predicated on dealing with one trade partner. Maybe we really should have branched out. a little bit. And I think that we're reevaluating that now too. And again, it's not something that can be fixed in a year or even 5 years, but we do need to start exploring other options. Like the pipeline that was supposed to come out oil wise from Alberta to where I live out east has been nixed so many times. And the pipeline that we currently have goes through like New Hampshire, Vermont, and like down that way. And like, America could cut that off tomorrow if they wanted to, just like Ontario, just like Quebec can say, boop, which the one thing that I thought retaliatory was going to happen was there's so much hydropower from the northern states, New York, Pennsylvania, Michigan, I think it's Michigan as well, and some of the northeastern states. They all get their power from Quebec, like through Churchill Falls. That's where Quebec generates so much of its revenue and siphons off the power to the United States and charges them. They can turn that off at any time. I thought that during the Super Bowl, they were going to cut the cord.
That would have been a great bit. That would have
led to America invading Canada immediately.
That would have been like an all-time historical bit. I wish I could go back in time and at least see that reality as it plays out.
No, we wouldn't be talking right now. Man, my show would be tough to do if I was at war with the United States.
Time to start thinking about where this hits home.
Yeah, well, Pat Mayo Experience currently number 1 in Spain right now on the fantasy charts. So maybe I get myself back over. My wife is, I guess she would be able to get her EU citizenship because her dad's from Scotland. I think Scotland's still in the EU. I don't remember though if they.
I was going to say I do not know that.
Was Brexit all of the UK or was it just? I think it was all the UK. So that probably doesn't even hold up anymore. My grandmother's from Holland, so maybe I can sneak in with a one quarter Dutch ancestry. Maybe we'll see with that way. Hopefully it doesn't come to that because doing golf best ball drafts while at war is going to be really tough.
That's going to be, and they're going to tariff, they might tariff your winnings. Tough scene.
Well, you guys already tariff your own winnings. That's why I love playing on Underdog.
Correct.
Because being in Canada, it's just like free money to me, and it's worth way more.
They do tariff our winnings. All right, everyone, we're getting out of here. Thank you very much for listening. Davis Maddock on YouTube, Mayo Media Network on YouTube. Tell a friend about both of them so that we don't have to give a shit what our thumbnails look like later.